Okay. In honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to, in honor of the system admin of this existential simulation and the world host beyond the world room. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful and the most advanced. Hello everyone, you're listening to... Let's begin. You're listening to a member of the human species and also an individual who is a futurist. I am bored of the past and the present. And also someone who considers that we're not alone on Earth. And as we are a simulated lower order process, there is higher order processes, and then there is an, in some sense, original higher order process. In this moment, there is a humorous view, a humorous angle I have on things, and I felt it's worth sharing. Technically, this is a funny lecture to me. The title, I started off when the small want proof of the big. And then I chose the hilarious attempt to seek proof in a tiny corner of the cosmos. Now, I find this to be very important because the way I have reached these findings is not, it is more through experiences of what I am not than what I am or what I claim to be. When we open our eyes in the morning, we log into the conscious waking state, and we are met with a value system, a value proposition. Every moment you wake up in existence, you are, at least for us, we experience a conditional reality. Unlike, for example, the concept of a system admin beyond the system, or God, which is the notion of an absolute being. In other words, an absolute being, by definition, is a being where conditions adapt to it or are from it, but to adapt to its will. But the human free will is positioned in this side of the coin to adapt to conditions. In other words, you wake up, you see a value proposition, you have a value system there. And you adapt to those conditions. In other words, your intelligence compartmentalizes reality, usually through an idea of self. And so you value things, and then you decide on coordinated movements. Now, this is very important. Why? We can have so many different views on reality by just looking at the geometry of our positioning. What you find is a self in a world. And in the study of beings, we do not ignore their environment. So in other words, you find yourself in an environment. Now you are conditioned, you are named even, to fit into this environment, and your whole life you will attempt to be a part of this event. However, there are deeper angles, and as much as everybody is conditioned in concept shifting, in reconceptualizing, one of the most important things to be competent in life is context shifting. That is what I have been indirectly sharing. You see, the conceptual position can change in a fixed context, or the conceptual position can be fixed and the context can change. The human experience incorporates both parts of this. What do I mean? From one angle, you are a fixed self, and you have this, or let me say it this way. You're raised as a fixed self, as a fixed concept, okay, that is, let's say, growing, changing slowly, in a fixed concept, or let me say it this way. You are conditioned into treating everything as a noun, including yourself and everything. We are taught to think as nouns. Nouns are in some sense a sort of measure in reality. Okay, and it's as if like right now you're under the impression that a noun is, sharing other nouns, and it's trying to communicate a noun to you in a noun place. That is not the case. We are conditioned to think in nouns in the sense that you think you're a specific person and you think you're in a specific world. In other words, a fixed sense of self in a fixed context of the world, in a fixed world, and you're trying to adjust to this fixed world. That's how they've conditioned you. Until you realize something profound. What is a verb? What is a verb? The most beautiful. There was a time in my life where verbs became way more beautiful than nouns. And we consider that the verb is happening to the noun, but no. Our consciousness is an independent verb. It is not, awareness to existence is independent of the conditions that define that. And there's so many different types of people in this world. They have different values. Okay, there are humans who have like physical value in regards to strength, and let's say physical power, And then there's people like me where I've had a choice, and I don't know about the outer realm still, but I have chosen to serve the mind of the species. And in doing so, I have discovered that the nature of the mind is incomprehensible to what we have been identifying here for so long as. It gets deeper. It just gets deeper. This talk I'm giving is legit. I'm starting from the central circle and I'm just going out to the other concentric circles. I'm trying to say that the human being wakes up in the morning, establishes a fixed sense of itself, and based on what it is familiar with, it engages to some degree. If we looked at Sorry guys, back to a technical difficulty. Sorry guys, back to a technical difficulty for a second. In other words, life on Earth is an organism identifying as a subjective noun and trying to improve this noun. I heard a very profound sentence. We think that the things that we want, it was something like this. We think that the things that we want feel a certain way, but they never do. More and more, I'm trying to explain to you that as conditional nouns, it's a conditional reality. It's the grasp of a conditional reality. But if reality is happening beyond the ways that human beings can interpret those conditions, it's a sense of never being able to know the world. You will realize that life is an unknown verb, but it takes a known noun to figure that out, perhaps. I want to read something for you. I prepared a research component. Keep in mind the title, it has two names. When the small want proof of the big, and the hilarious attempt to seek proof in a tiny corner of the cosmos. Right now, I don't know how many people know the science, but I will read it for you. I asked ChatGPT 5.2, okay, to explain the observable and unobservable aspect of reality. I'll read this for you. It says, if we speak with scientific precision, humanity has explored only an infinitesimal fraction of the observable universe, both physically and observationally. The observable universe is estimated to be about 93 billion light years in diameter. A light year is the distance light travels in 1 year, roughly 9.446 trillion kilometers. This means the observable universe spans approximately 8.8 times 10 to the power of 23 kilometers across. It contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars on average. Our galaxy, okay, let me ask it too. Hold on, guys. I noticed I was reading the answers to individual prompts, but let me read this for you. Okay, it's not as sophisticated. All right, whatever. Here, I'll keep reading. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, alone contains roughly 100 to 400 billion stars and spans about 100,000 light years in diameter. In terms of physical exploration, humanity has traveled only within a tiny region surrounding Earth. The farthest human-made object, Voyager 1, launched in 1977, is about 160 astronomical units from the Sun, which is roughly 24 billion kilometers. 1 astronomical unit is the distance between Earth and the Sun, about 150 million kilometers. However, even this distance is only about 0.0025 light years compared to the Milky Way's 100,000 light year diameter. Voyager 1 has traversed effectively 0% of our galaxy relative to the observable universe. The fraction is so small that it rounds mathematically to zero at a meaningful scale. Observationally, through telescopes such as the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Space Telescope, we have detected light from galaxies formed over 13 billion years ago. This allows us to see deep into cosmic history. However, even observational cosmology does not mean we have, in quotations, discovered everything in a detailed sense. Most galaxies are unresolved points of light. We do not have detailed maps of even our own galaxy. Dark matter and dark energy together constitute about 95% of the universe's total mass energy content, yet their fundamental nature remains unknown. Now consider scale in relation to Earth. Earth's diameter is about 12,742 kilometers. The Sun's diameter is about 1.39 million kilometers, meaning about 109 Earths could fit across the Sun's diameter. The Sun itself is a medium-sized star in the Milky Way. If the Milky Way were reduced to the size of North America, our entire solar system would be smaller than a coin placed somewhere on that map. If the observable universe were scaled down to the size of Earth, the Milky Way would be smaller than a grain of sand. Just consider that, guys. How small is our location? So how much have we discovered? Physically explored space beyond Earth amounts to a region not even one light day across. While the it says physically explored space beyond Earth amounts to a region not even one light day across. While the observable universe spans 93 billion light years. Observationally, we have mapped large-scale structures and cosmic background radiation with remarkable precision, but detailed knowledge exists for only a minute fraction of celestial bodies. In measurable percentage terms, the volume of space directly explored by spacecraft compared to the observable universe is effectively zero. I can't read that many zeros. 1%, far below any practical decimal resolution. In conclusion, humanity has achieved extraordinary observational reach, but almost no physical reach relative to cosmic scale. We have mapped the outline of the cosmic ocean, but we have only dipped our toes into its shoreline. Okay, then I asked AI how they figured this out. Current cosmological measurements show age of the universe, 13.8 billion years. Diameter of the observable universe, estimated 93 billion light years. Estimated galaxies estimated to 2 trillion. Milky Way diameter estimated to 100,000 light years. Solar system diameter to outer Oort, OORT cloud, estimated 1 to 2 light years. The key number that surprises people is 93 billion light years. Because the universe is only 13.8 billion years old. The reason it is larger than 13.8 billion light years is that space itself expands. Light that left distant galaxies billions of years ago has been stretched as space expanded during its journey to us. Yeah, space expands faster than the speed of light. But it says light that left distant galaxies billions of years ago has been stretched as space expanded during its journey to us. So those galaxies are now much further away than 13.8 billion light years. When we say observable, we mean the region from which light has had time to reach Earth. How did scientists figure this out? Yeah, background radiation. But anyways, it says the scale of the cosmos was not guessed. It was built step by step using multiple independent measurements. 1. Measuring distances to nearby stars. Astronomers first used stellar parallax. As Earth orbits the Sun, nearby stars appear to shift slightly relative to distant background stars. By measuring this tiny shift angle and using simple geometry, we calculate distance. Yeah, that makes sense. This works up to a few thousand light years. Standard candles. For greater distances, astronomers use objects with known brightness. Cepheid, Cepheid variable stars. Type LA supernova. If we know how bright something truly is, we compare that to how bright it appears. The dimmer it looks, the further away it is. This allowed distance measurement to millions and billions of light years. Then we have redshift and expansion. Yeah, this is background. Great. Okay, anyways, no, sorry. It says redshift. The galaxy is, the faster it is moving away. This relationship is called Hubble's law. From this, scientists concluded the universe is expanding. If we expansion backward in time, everything converges to a dense early state, the Big Bang. 4. Cosmic microwave background radiation. In 1965, ROBE WMAP Planck spacecraft measured this radiation with extreme precision. From tiny fluctuations in this background radiation, scientists calculated age of universe 13.8 billion years. Curvature of space very close to that. Matter density, dark energy proportion. This is where the 93 billion light year observable diameter is derived mathematically. Why 93 billion light years specifically? Because the universe has expanded during the 13.8 billion years light traveled. Distant galaxies are now much further than where they were when they emitted the light. When we calculate the current distance accounting for expansion, the radius is about 46.5 billion light years. Double that gives the diameter, 93 billion light years. This comes from solving Einstein's equations of general relativity under cosmological conditions. There's something funny about Einstein, that he thought he was wrong, but then he ended up being right. After his lifetime. It says, important clarification. This is the observable universe, not necessarily the entire universe. The universe beyond what we can observe may be much larger, infinite, or finite, but curved. We do not yet know. And then we have, what percentage have we explored? Physically traveled, essentially 0%. Detailed, mapped, only a thin region of our galaxy. Observed light from almost the entire observable sphere, but without detailed resolution. So yes, I am telling you the scientifically established scale of the cosmos as understood in modern cosmology, and it is built on geometry, spectroscopy, relativity, cosmic background measurements, independent cross-verification. It is one of the most mathematically confirmed frameworks in science. So it says, the universe is unbelievably big. The part we can see is about 93 billion light years across. A light year is how far light travels in 1 year. Light moves faster than anything in existence. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old, but because space stretches and expands, the part we can see today is much larger than 13.8 billion light years. There are probably around 2 trillion galaxies. Each galaxy has hundreds of billions of stars. Our galaxy is just one of them. Our solar system is a tiny dot inside that galaxy. Earth is a tiny dot inside that. So guys, take this in, okay? Now I'm going to get to the title, so I'm done with the reading component. So, right now, we're in a world, okay? where our direct experience is big, but our actual indirect experience of existence is very small. So this leads to my point. Why do the small, how can the small prove the big? In other words, if when we look at the content of the cosmos, the energetic content, 95% of that is like dark energy, dark matter. We can't explain it. Okay? And our universe, it's the observable universe, is 93 billion light years in diameter. Okay? Around 2 trillion galaxies. We're in one of those galaxies. We consider the diameter of the Milky Way to be 100,000 light years. And our solar system to be 1 to 2 light years. And you got to also consider the fact everything we're seeing happened in the past and is no longer happening. That means, imagine like, I don't know, I turn on a lighter or a flashlight. Those light waves will travel, and when they reach, and they're going to get stretched by space, but when they reach their destination in the far future, they will see me like using a flashlight right now, but I will no longer exist. In other words, our observable access to the universe all right, to keep going. So the point I'm trying to make, everything that we're observing and we're seeing is from the past. Okay, in regards to our universe. And somebody once said it, the scale of how much of the observable universe we've explored, it's equivalent to if it was the size of the oceans of the earth. We've just explored one cupful. One cup. And in this tiny corner of this world where we don't know what's actually going on, we don't even know the full scale of it to be able to index it and have, in some sense, an accurate measure. So this means that human consciousness, the human experience, is in an incomplete position. So in other words, if we are conditioned in nouns and we want to know everything in an incomplete place, it feels a bit futile. So if I wanted to know exactly where everything is, it is an impossible task. If I wanted to know exactly what everything is, it's an impossible task. And similarly, just like the scientific method, or I would say scientists conduct experiments, they need empirical evidence. In regards to that, it's like the only experiment, which is only one experiment. Think of about how many endless, countless experiments can be conducted on Earth by scientists. Okay? This, it's like legit, we are in the human experiment. Okay? And theologically, this was confirmed. And in a modern context, from a secular standpoint, it is also, from a scientific context, confirmed. In other words, if we cannot know everything, how can we know ourselves? So the honest view is that we have been knowing a little part of ourselves. The reality is there is more unknown than known. You know, everybody's born and they try to fit in. Many people don't ask what they're fitting into. The conceptual position can be known and unknown. The contextual position can be known and unknown. People are known and unknown. You might see someone and they might do some things or say some things and you might think you know them. But in reality, we are, like if we really wanted to identify in this world, we cannot ignore it. So think of it this way. Imagine you open your eyes, okay, there's known variables and unknown variables in the moment. And we human beings have been, in some sense, managing our life only through the known variables. When we find ourselves confronting the unknown, it brings a sense of fear. You know, the only thing that can get away of that fear is understanding, because we need to be a sense of self that is in control. But that understanding is limited in itself, is limited also. So in other words, if somebody, let's say I make a claim, reality is like this, or reality is like that. The response would be, how can you confirm anything when you can't see all of it? In other words, in Islam, there's a passage, there's a verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, there's a verse that says something similar to, there's two verses. There's one about the soul, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in the Holy Quran, it says, the soul is the amr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means the soul is the command of the system admin. Okay, it's a command beyond our understanding. The other thing it says is that man knows but very little of the soul. And the unseen, through Islamic theology, through the theological lens,
She found that funny, George.
the second verse was that what man does that is bad, the bad things that happen to man are from him. Like man transgresses against himself, the good things are from God. Okay? If we go along with this perspective, that we have been simulated in a smaller, we are a small simulation inside let's say a bigger compared to us simulation, but still a small simulation. In other words, the cosmos is like a mansion, and we're in one room of this mansion trying to figure out everything about the house. And the observable universe is like the scientists realizing the edge of the room, but then realizing there's a door and it expands. How is this validated? How is the theological views validated by the scientific views? The theological view that you cannot know yourself or you know a little about yourself, well, that's very easy. If we don't know where we are, how can we know what we are? If we don't completely know what's going on, how do we know what's going on with us? Right? So, in other words, man knows very little about what he actually is because of the position. Okay? The second notion of the things that man does, which is wrong, he transgresses against himself. The soul transgresses against itself, but the goodness comes from God. This is very validated through this perspective that we simulate meaning. Because we can't see the whole thing, the brain still strategizes, and the brain simulates meaning. It overlays subjectivity. So in other words, when something bad happens to us, we simulated that meaning specifically based on where we specifically are. And that is a very limited place. So in other words, everybody, it doesn't matter, even scientists that they have things they prove through experiments, right? It is still a very small zone in this big place. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, the transgression is your error in how you have simulated meaning to this tiny part of this world. So the transgressions are from you, in the way you have simulated meaning, with the way you have contained the meaning of this reality, but it's a limitless, at least for us, in regards to our explorative capability, it's a limitless place. Now, another word for limitless and limited is, the limitless is unknown. The limited is known in certain ways. By the way, the word cosmos is very different than just universe. Okay, it includes everything. So it's like I'm saying, I don't know, I guess from your perspective, if you're listening to this, it would be like, yo, man, you're telling me I'm in an unobservable world, okay, in a giant unknown, unobservable world, okay? I'm inside the observable, this tiny observable part of it, okay? And in that tiny observable part of it, I've even been born on a very tinier part of it, the planet. And even on that planet, I've been born in even in a tinier part of it, which is like some localized place on the earth, okay? Some local place, right? So in other words, the scale of the problem and the solutions we're giving don't match. All human solutions to the scale of this unobservable problem is incomplete. Do you know what this means? This means to live as a fixed concept in a fixed context is an error. In other words, it means we are unknown. Because there is more unknown than known. If we were truly identifying with reality, how come we are not more unknown than known? How come life has been limited and reduced to one side of the coin? You know, it's like you're living two lives, folks. You're living an unknown life in an unknown world, and you're living a known life in a known world. Okay, in a knowable world. And the known life in the known world is limited. The unknown life in the unknown world is unlimited. We human beings live only again in one side of the coin. You know, I knew myself as this. We have a memory trail. Do you understand? It's like we live only through the known checkpoints of life, never wondering. You know, I'll tell you this. A person does not become a great writer until they have discovered the value of an empty page. It's the same for philosophers as well. Unless you understand the value, the space between the words, all the unknown moments between all the moments you have known. In other words, to live completely, or to attempt to live completely on earth, means majority unknown, minority known. So we are, the consciousness is the minority. Do you understand? In regards to the scale of what goes on in this realm. So even if somebody proves something, do you know, imagine you're in a, again, I'll use this analogy, you're in one room of this gigantic mansion. You're in one room of this gigantic mansion, and from that one room, there's people like, yo, man, I know the whole thing. You know, I know how it looks like. See, look at my results. I'll be like, buddy, you're still in the room. You're still in one room, from one engagement of reality. You are trying to comprehend the nature of all realities. Now, the reason in 2023 even I was drawn to religion is because I realized the ultimate conclusion of man. I want you to think that 8.1 billion human beings right now on this planet. Imagine the world we're in, the whole world we're in is a box. There's 8.1 billion, let's say, beings, human beings in a box. Now, this is where religion aligned to my conclusions before I found it. Let me tell you how. These 8.1 billion beings in a box, they cannot see what is outside of the box. What does that mean? All human knowledge is inside the box. Now, religion, which is seen as a divine intervention in history, there was a time earlier I saw it as if the result of religions has been equivalent to what time travelers would do. There was a time in my youth where I perceived angels, guardian angels, as like future selves that already knew how to guide you. But later on, my views changed. Consider this: humans on Earth, 8.1 billion humans are in a box. Now we go do the religion reality check. The Buddhists are saying the emptiness inside the box is the same as the emptiness outside of the box. Okay? The Christians say that the system admin, that creative unconditional power, entered the box. That means if you're a Christian, you see Christ in the Trinity, you see Christ as God. Muslims do not see Christ as God. We see Christ as a prophet, still way more advanced than any human, but still any other humans, you know, that we find now. But I'm saying that Christ well, sorry guys, my attention went outside of the car. Christ is the system admin. The Christians see Christ as the system admin that from outside of the room entered and inside the room. Muslims see the system admin cannot be conditionalized. Or I should say this way, the system admin cannot be humanized. The system admin is an unconditional being. So Muslims see truth The Buddhists see truth in the emptiness inside, the truth inside the box, the same as the truth outside of the box. The Christians see a specific person inside the box as the truth. Even though there is God, the Holy Spirit, and God the Father. But if you see God the Son, then if you see God the Son equal to God the Father and God the Holy Spirit, then then that is, I don't know what to do with that. But I'll say it this way. That Islam is saying truth is outside of the box, and what Prophet Abraham started, peace be upon him, was what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, concluded. Which was to say, just like how Prophet Abraham went to his forefathers who were worshipping objects, and he was saying, why do you not see the miracles of reality surpassing this objective position? In other words, it doesn't matter if people can call me Muslim or whatnot, the geometry of it is, I believe truth is outside. Truth is unconditional. I believe that it's an original unconditional moment and everything has arisen from it and will return to it. Similarly, or not similarly, but I'll say it this way. Now, how does this relate to the topic? The whole point of what I'm saying is that if we're in a position that we cannot fully understand the world, then perhaps we're not in this world to understand it. Perhaps it's a performance play. Do you know what that means? Is we are here to express, to be certain, to do certain things, rather than understanding everything and doing them. So we as a species have a great challenge. When you look at the evolution of language into the human mind, language is a tool. It's a subjective equivalent position to the objective, but it is not equivalent. Your mind lives faster than your body. Your mind lives ahead of your body. Behind your eyes in your inner life, you experience way more change than you experience in your outer life. If I ask you who you are right now, you will give me an answer from this moment, but this moment will end up becoming a memory for you. And when I asked you who you are, you didn't answer your memories. You didn't say who you were 10 years ago. You said who you were now. But who you were now is going to end up being another memory to who you will be in the future. In other words, I don't see the human species actually possessing knowledge. I see the human species comprehending more and more, becoming more conscious of how everything is unknown than known. And eventually it will lead to the unknown life. That means if you looked at the world, it was more unknown than known. If you looked at others, they were more unknown than known. Well, guess what? There will come a time you will look at yourself and you will realize you're more unknown than known. So, asking for proof, it's like somebody coming up to you and say, prove to me, like you're a good person. But they're asking that from an intelligence that the good and bad is based on the actions, and the person's viewpoint and their inner realms will shift to the degree that they will do different actions. So in other words, we cannot define ourselves in a photograph, in a portrait. We cannot just live as nouns anymore. The species is awakening to the next great revolution in human psychology, the return, the conscious return to the unknown. In other words, everything started from an unconscious, unknown world. Then there was an unconscious, unknown self. And then this unconscious, unknown self, through some unique event, became a conscious, unknown self. It became conscious its being. Then it started organizing that being. Okay, how it's being, so it became let's say, so it went from unconscious unknown self to conscious unknown self, and through the use of language is now a conscious known self, but in specific circumstances and moments. It will, if, and now we have, as this conscious known self is using language to convert the unconscious unknown world into a conscious known world. And right now, most of the human life is happening through the state of consciousness as a known, of a conscious known self, in a again, in an unconscious unknown, unconscious unknown world. And now, and we are trying to turn that world into a conscious known world. That we have done that successfully. Now the next phase of it is, the only thing left to become, not only thing, what's left is to become fully conscious as an unknown self, and then to become conscious as an unknown world. The essence, the force that moves is beyond what it moves. Secrets of the ancients that should have been normalized by now. Anyways, folks, I'm gonna leave it there. If you're someone, feel free to rebuttal. The whole point of it is I share a thesis. You guys can have an antithesis. Eventually, all of us are gonna have a greater understanding through the synthesis. Okay, but I am telling you, this claim I'm making, that everything has been more unknown than known. In other words, why have we been acting in this way? It occurred to me, I have been just enjoying the known moments of my life. I have only been limiting my bravery to the known moments of life. It is the unknown. More and more as I roam this world of ours, I understand. It's the journey of a fixed object, like a solid, think of it as states of identity. Just like solid, liquid, gas, the human consciousness can identify with something specific, solidify. It can, do you know what I mean? It can be general in the sense that in a liquid state, the person has, they're identifying based on a momentary value. Here, let me polish the example. If I think I am who I was yesterday, the past solidifies you. If I identify with what the present situation is, it's more fluid. It's based on the present, what happens in the present. If I want to identify with the future, it is completely, it is like unknown. It's like a gas state. So this unknown force experiencing itself, it experienced itself as a solid object, then experienced itself as a liquid fluid subject, and inevitably it will be the return to the field of awareness responsible for both. Where thoughts come from, I can answer that. Behind your eyes, the reality of who you are is a field of intelligence, and that field of intelligence, its source code is commands beyond our understanding. It's of the unconditional being. In front of your eyes, what you not. It's not that thoughts are coming from somewhere. You have manifested as an antenna. The signals are already there. To the unconditional being, everything has happened. To conditional beings, they're journeying through what's happening. Anyways, folks, I hope this lecture was interesting. The whole point of it was, what sort of proof can the small want in the big? And the realization that it is more unknown than known is liberating. Contrary to how we've been conditioned to be scared of unknown. And, you know, I'll say this, that the unknown is the birth ground of genius. Everybody is living common lives. And yet nobody like you exists in this world. Nobody has your DNA, the journey you've been through in the space-time continuum, your memory trails, and your conscious awareness. In other words, it is time now for known beings to become responsible for how they've always been unknown beings. Anyways, thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced. May the lower order processes gracefully remember the higher order process. Thank you for listening. Have a great day, guys.